So this morning, we're in this series called Earth Sunday, or Sundays, I suppose. And what we're doing, in a lot of ways, is what we do every Sunday. In some ways, every Sunday is Earth Sunday, because what we're trying to do is connect our faith to our earthly lives, to recognize that our faith calls us to stay here, to be here in new and important ways. That's what we do every Sunday. So Earth Sunday number, right, 5,687, if you prefer. And the scriptures this morning weren't exactly Earth Sunday sort of scriptures, but, and yet they are part of this reminder. So he started with this very odd image this morning in Psalm 133. How very good and pleasant it is when brothers and hopefully sisters and others live together in unity. And we're the church of the brothers and sisters and others. And yeah, right? It's really good and pleasant when we live together in unity or in harmony for us, I think, because, like all of us agreeing on the same thing at the same time ain't going to happen. But, if we're in harmony, that's pretty great. And, right, it reminds us that the unity we do have, the harmony we do have is work. And we do this deliberately, and it's well worthwhile. So then the psalmist goes on to give us this beautiful metaphor. He says, oh yeah, it's like oil that gets poured on your head and flows down your beard. Well, obviously as a metaphor, this doesn't work for probably any of us. I'm guessing nobody here just really, really gets excited about the idea of someone coming and pouring some olive oil on your head and having it flow down your face. Right? And the psalmist recognizes that, like, for lots of us, this isn't even a possible image. Right? All the women, what does it feel like to have oil flow down your beard? No idea, right? So it talks about, well, Aaron's beard, right? So somebody else's beard, even that, like, just how amazing that would be. Even then, doesn't work. And yet, right, it's a reminder that our worship connects us to ordinary pleasure of physical sensation. Right? That our worship calls us to be in our bodies, not just in our heads, or we're not just, sort of souls that exist and just happen to have a body, but this is all of us. Even negatively, even if we say, oh man, I just can't get into this. This is not my image at all, right? Even then it's to remind you that, yeah, we feel this physically. So let's change it, right? How good and pleasant it is for when kindred live together in unity. It's like an ice cold glass of tea on a hot day. It's like a hot cup of cocoa on a cold winter evening. Right? Images that work a little better for us. And even these things connect us to the earth, right? Tea is a plant, right? I don't know if you've ever seen a little tea bush, but it's a small little bush. And you can go pick the leaves, and through some process, eventually it becomes what you recognize as tea in your cup. Right? Or cocoa. Cocoa is a plant too, right? Scott, I sent you some plant pictures. You got those for us? Right, so that's what a cocoa pod looks like. And inside the white goop, there's little brown seeds. And the white goop's actually edible. You can eat that. You could suck off the seed if you wanted to. It's not great, but it's okay. It's kind of sweet. And there's a little brown seed in there, and then it's a long process from there to what you'd recognize as hot cocoa in your cup. But that's what a pod looks like, right? And so the next picture, that's what a cocoa tree looks like. And those are the pods. Sometimes they're yellow and sometimes they're white, right? So anyway, right? So it's a reminder that all of these things connect us to the earth. And sometimes we forget that. Right? Because we see this, cocoa comes in a little pouch and what does this have to do with the earth, right? And tea comes in a little bag, right, that we toss out. And what does this have to do with the earth? But it's all connected. The Bible reminds us that we are fundamentally earth creatures. The first earth creature the Bible calls Adam, which comes from the word for earth, Adamah, right? So earth creature comes from earth, right? Dirtbags. That's what we are. We are not in doing this, we are not alone, right? We are interdependent with other people and with the earth, right? Everything you ate this morning, in some sense, came from the earth, right? I mean, there are probably lots of chemicals involved, unfortunately, but hopefully not too many, at least. So then we move to John, the John passage that was read, right, about Jesus and his post-resurrection appearance. And John is always this gospel that moves us both into and beyond our basic human existence, right? So it starts with a very physical image of Jesus' body with nail holes in it, right? So it speaks to us of torture and pain and death. And at the same time, it moves us beyond this physical existence to Jesus, who just sort of appears in a locked room and then disappears and he's gone again, right? And then it talks back about seeing and believing, and then about the possibility of believing without seeing. But even here, even in the not connected parts of this gospel, it plunges us back into life. Right? The ultimate goal, says John, is through believing, you might have life in his name. The Gospel of John sounds very spiritual, and it's often overly spiritualized. It becomes all about the head and the heart and not so much about the body. But ultimately, John reminds us it's the body of Jesus that brings us this life. And if we had had time, we could have read all the way through chapter 21, right? So the Gospel of John seems to end at the end of chapter 20, and then it starts all up again in chapter 21. And it connects us very much more, with the earth, right? That these are the stories of Jesus, that the disciples go fishing, right? And Jesus is suddenly standing on the shore and he's cooking fish and he's eating it. So chapter 21 is sort of a chapter you can smell. And you can smell all of these things in your imagination quite easily. And then chapter 21 is also the place where Jesus confronts Peter and he says, feed my sheep, which is both a metaphor and potentially not. I mean, obviously the sheep part is, right? Peter isn't supposed to become a shepherd in the literal sense of the term, right? But maybe feed is both a metaphor and not. But clearly, Peter is called to do something good here and now, right? Jesus doesn't say, hey, Peter, look, you messed up. What you got to do is you got to go sit up on a mountain for 2 years by yourself and contemplate the meaning of all of this, right? No. Jesus says, Peter, get out there, get to work. That's how you work this out, right? And at the same time, right, if Peter abandons his nets, right, he's out there fishing, and if he abandons his nets to go and feed the sheep, whatever, that happens to mean for him at any particular time, there's also the reality that someone else is going to have to feed him, right? Because, right, I'm sure his father on the way out the door reminded him, hey, Peter, these fish aren't going to catch themselves, boy. And so, right, when Peter goes out to feed the sheep, someone else has to feed Peter. Then we went to the book of Acts. And Acts tells us about the earliest attempt to take the teachings and example of Jesus and make them concrete. Right? We listened to Jesus and we saw Jesus and then we did this. And it wasn't sitting alone in a room being spiritual, it was going out and creating community. Now Luke is always, so Luke wrote Luke and Acts. And in a lot of ways, this is sort of the story through rose-colored glasses. And sometimes I think about it's best to read the book of Acts with sort of a Cheech and Chong kind of attitude, right? So Luke as the hippie dude who's always like, hey man, like maybe just like we had all stuff in common, and it was all beautiful. And people loved us, and we just, it was all great. So that's sort of the Luke attitude toward things. And we recognize that there's something very unearthly about Luke's understanding, that the disciples sold their fields. And selling fields is, never a good long-term ideal. Because if you sell your fields, right? Yeah, you've got a lot of money for a while, but then it goes away, right? They're going to give it all away. And then what do you eat? Right? So clearly, some part of the early church abandoned the earth for the expected return of Jesus, right? So they had this sort of apocalyptic thing going. Right? But even then, right, the idea was that you could sell your fields now because God was going to come and give them back to you, right? So it was still an earthly vision. It just doesn't always work out that way. It seems that in some ways the early church forgot about their connection to the earth. And we too live in a society where we have forgotten. This week, I was out at Pantry Plus More helping move a bunch of cases of food into storage so that it could be moved out of storage and out into people's homes. And as I was moving these cases of food, I noticed that we were moving cases of canned vegetables. And it said on these cans, on these boxes, product of China on vegetables. Now, I know that if you start here and you drive west, whichever direction west is from where I'm sitting, if you drive west, you're going to come across field after field after field. Once you get out of the mountains, right? Once you hit the Ohio, you're going to have field for thousands of miles, right? Hundreds of miles anyway, just field after field after field. Right now, just starting to come up or being planted. And soon it's going to be corn and beans and corn. And the corn and the beans are going to be turned into sugar. It's going to be turned into ethanol. It's going to be turned into animal food while we import vegetables from China. What a strange world we live in, right? Because we have, right? Someone has bought into this corporate agriculture model where food is grown to increase the stock price, right, of the corporation. And so we import vegetables from China and grow corn for ethanol for whatever reason. And so our faith plunges us back into the world. Right? It wants to remind us that we exist as physical human creatures, and we have to live in the reality of food and water and soil. And we have to learn from the mistakes of the past and the present. We have not always, right? We have forgotten so many things, and to live toward a better future. Thus, our call is to feed my sheep on something more than simply Twinkies and Coke. So this is the first in our series of Earth Sunday, or 5,687th of a series of Earth Sunday. Because we can't just, well, we're going to do this one week and then we'll move on to more spiritual things. We are at a time now where we need to make a long-term change to the way we live on the earth. And I don't know what this means for you. Maybe it means to get some land, or to repurpose the land you have, or to plant and care and weed and harvest and prepare for next year. And all of these things, right? Something has to change. And it starts with a recognition that we, you and I, are dirtbags, part of the earth, part of the soil. So I invite you to take up this challenge this coming week and every week. Thank you.